We are mind, body, and soul. When you go to the doctor with a problem, he doesn't address the mind or the soul part of our existence. He only looks at the body and treats the symptoms and not the cause. One of my favorite projects is in the Northern Cape in the Kalahari Desert, where we're growing food literally on a rock bed. And we're growing using permaculture techniques. So we're building the soil. A lot of the farmers, if they have banking loans, they are forced to use those chemicals, or the banks will stop the funding. But in nature, you'd never ever find only one plant growing. Not even in the lawn, there are other plants growing in between it. And we call this multi crop farming companion planting. Different plants have different properties and they feed and communicate with each other. So, for example, in millies, the way we grow our corn, we call it the three sisters, where we've got the pumpkin, the millies or the corn, and beans. Chickens are given a hormone growth supplement so that they are ready for the pot within 6 weeks. A lot of people tell me I can't grow my own food, and I say nonsense. Food can grow in containers. So if you have a room in your house that gets direct sunlight, even if it's for an hour or two, so you can grow tomatoes indoors, onions. I don't know why we buy so many onions, because if you take the root part of the onion, onions only take 2 years before they're ready to harvest from seed. But if you grow them from the rootstock, you can harvest them within a few months.
Greetings, seekers of ancient wisdom. We're here today for another empowering show. So, today we're going to be talking about a couple of things: gardening, looking after yourself, and going back to nature. So, today I'm joined by Nikki Cruden from Rooted in Grace. So, Nikki, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you, Deepak. Very happy to be here with you. It's a blessing. Thank you.
Amazing. So, Nikki, we're very interested. How did you get into this field of gardening and making all these wonderful natural products for people? Maybe you can give us your backstory.
Thank you, Deepak. So I grew up as a what we would call a plotter. I'm a farm girl, and growing our own food was natural and normal. We had a magnificent vegetable shop across the road from us. So, as the years went on, we got lazy and just walked across the road to buy food. But what they were doing was using fertilizers, which I think now, later on in my adult years, I think was possibly the cause between all of my siblings and the next generation's illnesses. So I grew up on a plot. It was natural to use natural remedies. I thought everybody did this. I thought it was common knowledge. It was only my adult years that I realized very few people know anything about natural remedies. In my 20s, I got extremely ill. I developed ME fatigue syndrome, and that was the start of my leaving my career. I was educated in the computer industry and followed natural healing. So I first became a certified herbal healer. Actually, what happened was people realized and noticed there was a huge difference in me, and people wanted me to start supplying them with alternative solutions, and I didn't have the confidence to help other people. So that's why I was motivated to become certified. And healing is a process. There's so many modalities involved, and so I naturally started growing my own food because I realized most of the food you buy in the shop has either got colorants, preservatives, MSG, artificial flavorings, and all of these things have started having a huge impact on my health. So started growing my own food and then started encouraging other people to grow their own food. I got involved in community projects, so we were helping the destitute. And handing out clothes and food is a great idea, but it creates the wrong message. So what I started doing was growing food from my kitchen in 2 liter milk bottles. So over the last 20 years, I've probably distributed over 2,000 trees around the country. And you can put 6 milk bottles in a packet, so it's easy to walk off with 12 trees and jump on a taxi. So I try and keep the trees for 5 to 7 years because most fruit trees take 7 years before they start generating fruit anyway. So that's the long and the short. Then the Rooted in Grace, that's an online shop that I didn't plan to have an online shop. I've been trying for the last 10 years to get everybody else to sell my products on their shop because I do spend a lot of time in the bush. I've got projects around the country where we're starting community projects and food forests. So, as the founder of this movement, I need to go there and implement the project. So I spend a lot of time in the bush, and that's why I didn't want an online shop because sometimes I'm like an hour's drive from the closest shop. So anyway, my cousin blessed me with a shop. It's been going it was developed 3 years ago, and we'll be putting more of a natural healing flavor to the shop. So busy getting new suppliers together, but there's over 200 products on the shop, so it's already got momentum. So that's the long story in the short version. I had to get very ill.
Yeah, that is so wonderful. I love the shop because it's got so many different products on there, and we're going to talk about that in detail. But I wanted to start off with the growing your own food, because you mentioned a lot of the fruits and vegetables that we get in the shops these days. They have unnatural fertilizers, I guess. You mentioned colorants, and maybe they use pesticides and all these things. And you said it made you quite sick, right? So you developed an illness in your 20s from eating this food with all these chemicals in it. But so many people are eating this stuff and they seem to be not getting sick. Or do you think they are sick, but they don't know about it? I mean, how do you view that?
So that's a good question and multiple layers to the answer. But I would say that, we are mind, body, and soul. And when you go to the doctor with a problem, he doesn't address the mind or the soul part of our existence. He only looks at the body and treats the symptoms and not the cause. And most of the time, the cause is in the way we think. So, what was very important for me, because I had a self sabotaging thought pattern, feeling possibly not good enough, not worthy. So, that was a huge thing that I had to address for myself. And then realizing that all your thoughts actually leave an imprint in the universe. So when you entertain negative thoughts, it not only has a bad imprint on your body because it lets off chemicals in all of your cells, it also leaves an imprint in the universe. So when I had that paradigm shift, my healing was enormous. And then also, I have a very religious family, and my mother's side were very Christian. And there was a huge prayer ring, which I think was probably the most important part of my healing was the prayer ring. And the doctors didn't think I'd make 27. I've doubled my life expectancy, and here I am.
So let's talk about the chemicals that the farmers are using in growing their food, right? They put huge amount of fertilizer in, they destroying the soil because they just grow one type of crop, so the soil is malnourished. On top of that, they spray it with pesticides, so the pesticides go into the food, and then we eat the food with the pesticides. On top of that, the shops are also adding colorants to our food to make it look nicer. But again, those are more chemicals that we're putting into our body when we eat these foods. So, do you think it's possible to grow your own food without using fertilizers and pesticides and obviously colorants we don't need? But is it possible to grow without pesticides and fertilizer?
One of my favorite projects is in the Northern Cape in the Kalahari Desert, where we're growing food literally on a rock bed. And we're growing using permaculture techniques. So we're building the soil. So for the last nearly 200 years now, what farmers have been doing is they plow up the land. When you plow up the land, you damage and even destroy all the microorganisms in the soil. So they don't like to be exposed to direct sunlight. They can't handle heat. So there are a lot of reasons why the microbes cannot survive plowing. So your plants grow in your top 15, between 10 and 20 centimeters of your topsoil. And that's where all the life is that communicates with your plants. What we're doing today is we're growing plants, we germinate them with chemicals. So the plant has already no longer got its own natural defense. And then we put this genetically modified seed in the soil. It needs to be force fed with NPK, your fertilizers, because it doesn't have the natural ability to communicate with primarily the microorganisms in the soil, which invariably are dead because they've been plowed. And all these fertilizers actually kill the microorganisms in the soil. A lot of people will say, what are microorganisms? Because it's a very strange field. And when we were at school, we knew very little about microorganisms. In fact, they were only discovered when microscopes came out. What we do know is that there are more microorganisms on your body than you have body cells. And your body has microorganisms all over, on your skin, in your mouth, down your throat, in your stomach, in the gut lining. So when we take, for example, antibiotics, that destroys the microorganisms in your body. So then it develops other problems like internal or gut problems. Like Patrick Horford said, death starts in the gut. So it's so important to eat healthy food that has full energy. So when we grow in greenhouses and under lights, and I'm thinking specifically, I laugh about the cannabis industry. It's so regulated and everything's grown according to specs and logistics and technology. But that is not how medicine grows. Medicine needs sun energy. So everything on the planet is electromagnetic. And we need sun energy, whether you're a plant or an animal, we all need sun energy. So if you're eating foliage, for example, that is stored sun energy. If you're eating meat, there are a lot of people who've turned to meat-only diets, and I've seen a lot of positive results from that. That is stored sun energy because the animal you're eating grew on grass, which is all stored sun energy. So that's another thing that we are failing to recognize. Eating synthesized food is not energy for your body. It might for your stomach, but it doesn't actually feed the body's cells. Does that answer your question? But we're so in.
Yeah, it does. It does a little bit. So I didn't even realize that plowing the ground was so bad. I mean, if I think about the movies that I've watched about olden days, the farmer had the ox and the plow behind it, and they would walk and plow the soil before they started planting. I had no idea that was going to destroy the microbiomes of the soil. And then you mentioned a GMO seed. So all the seeds now, Monsanto and all the seed companies have made genetically modified seeds. But you're telling me now those seeds are not able to communicate properly with the microbiomes, which we also kill when we plow the soil. So it sounds like the farmers are doing so much damage, and the seed companies. Like, how have we got to the state where we're eating this, and how do we get out of this this bad food cycle that we're caught in?
This is such a good question. And, the powers that be have almost forced us to go this route. So, a lot of the farmers, if they have banking loans, they are forced to use those chemicals, or the banks will stop the funding. So, yeah, that's a huge problem. I'm not sure how we're going to get around this, but COVID has helped a lot because with COVID, the price of fertilizers went through the roof. And a lot of smaller farmers who are not reliant on the banks have started realizing their products, their produce is so much healthier using microbes at a fraction of the cost. So you can get multiple crops, for example, on mealies, multiple heads on a crop. Um, your nutrient value is so much higher. You have less pesticides, pathogens, and anaerobic. So you get two types of microorganisms. Basically, you get aerobic and anaerobic. Anaerobic are the bad guys that breed pathogens, and aerobic are the ones that we want. And most of the microorganisms in our body are aerobic. So, what are microorganisms? They consist of all living forms that are so small you can't see them without using a microscope. And it includes things like fungi, bacteria. Bacteria are very important. So, bacteria basically doubles every 20 minutes. The fungi eats the bacteria. The fungi doubles literally every 4 hours. So that's why you need a time period for the organic material to break down. So the best way to get around using fertilizers is to start mulching. So what we do in all of our gardens, we lay it with cardboard so that it sort of seals the base. Then you line it with wooden sticks, logs, stones, etc. So this also helps stop wind erosion. It stops the soil from drying out, keeps the moisture in, and it provides a habitat for the microorganisms. And then from there on, we fill that box now with sticks, branches, and then smaller, finer organic material on top, like leaves. Charcoal is essential for microorganisms. It actually creates like a microorganism hotel, charcoal. And, that's the base of life, carbon. Everything exists, has carbon in it, even you and I. We're basically water carbon uh, machines walking around. So, yeah, you can make your own fertilizer and compost. We actually brew microorganisms, which we supply to farmers nationwide. We supply them with brew packs. So it takes about a month, minimum 3 weeks, to brew your own microorganisms. And this is a remedy that was put together by the late Nico Snyman, who was an agronomist and a farmer. And his son, who was farming in Central Africa, was having tremendous problems trying to grow corn, mealies, because the soil was so degraded. So when you put fertilizers on the soil all the time, the plants cannot absorb most of that. So it's not in a form that the plants can absorb. That's why microorganisms are essential, because in the ribosome, around the roots of the plants, those microorganisms break down the materials and the matter to a form that the plants can readily absorb. But it's much greater than that, because plants actually communicate with the microorganisms in the soil. So as the plant develops, so as a little seedling or a sapling, it doesn't need as much nutrients as it does when it starts to flower or bear fruit. Then it needs a huge amount of nutrients. And that communication happens through the ribosphere in the root system, which is literally 10, 20 centimeters below the surface of the soil. There is more life below the soil than above. We just can't see it.
That is so amazing. So you spend a lot of time making your own natural fertilizer, basically making a home for the microbiomes to grow. I think you mentioned you use cardboard and sticks, and then you put a whole bunch of vegetation to mulch, and then you, I guess, leave it for a couple of weeks. I have seen some videos where they add water and they turn it, regularly to mix it, and then you get really good fertilizer, and that's what you're using on your soil. It's natural fertilizers, not your chemical manufactured fertilizer that you get from the shops. It's natural fertilizer full of microbiomes, and you put that on your soil. And then you mentioned something else about growing multiple crops, right? Well, yeah. So tell us about that. I've heard a little bit about that, having more variety of crops. Because when I look at the farms, if I drive around a farming area in Joburg or even outside Gauteng, if you look at the farm, they just got one crop. They have a single pivot system of some watering, and they have just one crop over like 100 um, hectares or whatever it is. It's like, what is this multi-crop system you're talking about?
I can understand the sense in monocrop farming. It helps with the farming equipment and all the rest of it. But in nature, you'd never ever find only one plant growing. Not even in the lawn. There are other plants growing in between it. And we call this multi-crop farming companion planting. So different plants have different properties and they feed and communicate with each other. So, for example, in millies, the way we grow our corn, we call it the three sisters, where we've got the pumpkin, the millies or the corn, and beans. So, beans are nitrogen fixers, they put the nitrogen back in the soil. The millie is nitrogen hungry. So, there's a symbiotic relationship between the two. And then the pumpkin or butternut or whatever has large leaves, which keeps the soil protected from the sun. So it keeps the moisture fixed in the soil. And it provides a fantastic mulch when the leaves die off. So there's the full circle of life implemented. When you do monocrop farming, you are basically forced to use fertilizers because there's nothing to feed those plants. I think of other farms, a lot of the farmers that use the biomicrobe solutions. Microorganisms doesn't just help the gut, it doesn't just help the plants. Mammals and plants are so similar, our makeup. We eat, we breathe, we excrete, we reproduce. And plants do move, even though it's minuscule. They move larger distances in the next generation. But we actually function so similarly. Um, and the soil, once you've been putting fertilizers and stuff on the soil, you kill the natural microorganisms. Those fertilizers build up. So remember, the ones that are left in the soil are components that the plants are not able to absorb through their root system. This stuff leaches into the rivers and into the sea. So we don't even realize the long-term impact that we as humans are causing just by doing monocrop farming. And then the thing that really gets to me, Deepak, is they actually even mow down the wind breakers. You need to have tree lines. It stops the wind, it protects shade for plants, animals, insects. And that's the most important part about monocrop farming is the insects. Because you need insects, and we all know bees are vital here, to pollinate your plants. So the thing with monocrop farming, with MGO, genetically modified organisms, they do not reproduce seed. So the powers that be do not want us to produce our own seed. They want us to be forced to buy from their seed bank. So that's one huge disadvantage. But for me, the most crucial disadvantage is that will make us as humans become impotent. We will also no longer produce seed. And I think that's probably the main goal is to stop population growth.
You've actually you've actually answered and maybe opened up a question I was going to ask, because I have a small health practice and I do homeopathy, energy medicine, and stuff like that. But I've noticed a lot of women coming to me with a lot of issues in their cycle. So a lot of women have irregular cycles. That's quite common. A lot of them have issues in their womb. So they have like a cyst growing, or they have fibromyalgia or something in their womb. And there's infertility issues. I even had one young girl, she was only 20 years old, and she did not have a menstrual cycle for 12 months. And she wasn't pregnant, but for 12 months, she had no menstrual cycle. And I know it's coming from eating this infertile food. We're eating food that doesn't produce seed. So obviously, when we eat that regularly, that's going to, like you said, make us impotent or make us infertile. And it's crazy. I don't know if there is an agenda. Probably there is, because the deeper you dig into these big corporations, you can really go down a rabbit hole. And I wouldn't be surprised if there is an agenda of them to reduce the population and make us all infertile or whatever it is. But that's totally crazy for me. That's actually happening, right? And if you even go to the animals, the chickens, in the olden days, you would have a chicken and a rooster, and the rooster would mate with the chicken, and that's how the chicken would lay an egg, or, the hen would lay an egg. But now they've taken the rooster completely out, and they feed the chickens a certain type of food that makes them lay eggs that are infertile. They're legs that um, have not been done by the rooster fertilizing the chicken. The chicken just lays this egg that will never hatch because it's not been fertilized, and people are eating these infertile eggs. So we're eating infertile foods from the GMO, GMO foods, the vegetables and the fruits. We're eating infertile eggs. It's no surprise to me that we have such a huge case of infertility now. Women coming with irregular cycles, women coming with very difficult cycles, women coming with issues in their womb. So how do we get out of this? I mean, is it just going back to natural foods, back to what do they call it? Heirloom, trying to get your heirloom seeds, and eggs, trying to get your eggs that have been fertilized, and across all the foods. Maybe you can talk about that.
We noticed a few decades ago is through feeding chickens. Let's talk about chickens for a while. Chickens are given a hormone growth supplement so that they are ready for the pot within 6 weeks. So they are force fed food to fatten them up very fast, and they are given uh, antibiotics, uh, lots of different types of medications. But what that has done is it's affected our children's hormones. And, in the past, girls never went into their cycle before minimum 16. It was normal 16, 18, 19 to go into a cycle. Nowadays, girls are going into their cycle as young as 7, 8, 9. They're still children. And it's because of the chickens that are fed hormones so that they can be ready for the pot within 6 weeks. Similarly with the milk, milk, it's homogenized these days, it's pasteurized, and we don't know what the cattle are being fed. Are they eating natural green pastures? Are they being fed genetically modified lucerne, or there's a million different possibilities here. So, yeah, very difficult. Our meat, our vegetables, and even our air is being poisoned with all these chemtrails. When we were children, you never saw chemtrails. They were from aircraft's fumes. But nowadays, there is definitely something being pumped. It's not nowadays. I've noticed it for more than 20 years now. And on all of our projects around the country, it doesn't matter which project I go to, I see chemtrails on all of them. And most of our projects are in far deep, remote areas, where we're setting up food forests. So the chemtrails is a real concern. We know that there is graphene oxide in the chemtrails. And graphene oxide is a product that was used in the COVID vaccines. And we know that the COVID vaccines are not actually good for you. They are not real vaccines. So that leads to my other problem. We've noticed a lot of strange things happening with people who were vaccinated. So is it your diet? Is it your environment? Is it your way of thinking? Do you have cystic thoughts of yourself? Because that sets off a chemical reaction in your body and your body reacts. So if you tell yourself you're unhappy, you're depressed, you're in fear or anger, any of these negative emotions, the body reacts to that and will produce what you are calling it for. So that's why it's so important to monitor your thoughts. As soon as you catch yourself in a negative thought, take note and try and think of it in a more positive way. You know, things don't happen to us, they happen for us. And when you notice that, that's a paradigm shift. Everything happens for us. It's part of our purpose. We all come to this planet for a divine purpose. Nobody has your purpose. So it's pointless trying to imitate somebody else. They haven't got your purpose. Your purpose is unique. We all have gifts to find ways of using our gifts to help other people. So, if you don't activate on your gifts and work towards finding your purpose, it does create an imbalance in your energy. So, yeah, it's a very broad question, that Deepak. That's
So, Nikki, YouTube have been very naughty, and every time I mention the V word, especially the V word from 2020, they've taken down my video, they've given me strikes, they've made me do a whole bunch of stuff because they don't want anyone to talk about the V word. But we all know what the V word is the jib jab, that they made us all get. So I want everyone to know the jib jab has got graphene oxide in it, and graphene oxide is very, very toxic. It's sort of like a metal, but not a metal. It can be influenced by electromagnetic frequencies. That's why they've got these towers and cell phone towers and 5G going up everywhere, because those towers can actually activate the graphene oxide in our body to do certain things. So the jib jab was full of that, and now Nikki's telling us that the chemtrails, all this smoke that you see coming out of airplanes that they fly in the sky, chemtrails, chemical trails, they're full of aluminum, other heavy metals, and also the graphene oxide, and the graphene oxide was also in the jib jab. So you guys know that. We have spoken about it before on other shows. So just be aware, they are poisoning us from every single angle. But Nikki, I've noticed, in South Africa, I have noticed chemtrails, but not that much. But when I go to Europe, oh my goodness, it is insane how much chemtrails are there. You just see every single day, no matter what town or little city you're in, every single day there's a plane flying overhead just shooting out these chemtrails. In South Africa, I don't see it that often. So maybe I was just ignorant, and I thought, oh, wow, phew, at least I'm safe here. But you're telling me the chemtrails are happening here as well. What do they do? Do they fly it at night or something? Or do they just hit certain areas?
fly in broad daylight. I've got so much video footage of they fly all over the show. There is not one province that they don't cover. And some days they actually form grid lines in the sky. And a lot of people who are not aware of chemtrails will tell me, no, that's not chemtrails. That's just from the aircraft's fumes. But a chemtrail is different because normal plane fumes will dissipate. But a chemtrail actually grows. It billows out. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's definitely not natural. And you can be sure all of that is going to hit the earth, hit the soil, and penetrate our plants in some form or another. So, yeah, we are being chemtrailed in every single province. And I'd say nearly every day.
That is so insane. So, to the viewers out there, go investigate chemtrails. If you need more information, you can reach out to me. I'll also leave Nikki's details below. You can reach out to her to find out more about it. But chemtrails is another serious thing. They're poisoning our air. I'm sure you know they're poisoning our water. Maybe that's something you want to talk about. I've done a lot of research into the water. They've been putting fluoride in the water. fluoride, goes into the pineal gland and calcifies the pineal gland. So you shut down your third eye, you shut down your pineal gland functions. There's so many other chemicals that they put into the water as well. They tell us, oh, we need to clean the water, we need to um, make it safe for drinking. But no, that's not the case at all. They're poisoning the water to poison you. Do you know about the water stuff, Nikki?
Yeah, absolutely. Our water is certainly not what it was. Before we became a democratic country, we had the world's best water. And so water actually leads you to a far more greater subject. So water is a very unique property. Um, Water has a memory ability. So a lot of us don't realize this, but water, as we drink it from the tap, isn't the same water we used to drink even 200 years ago. Right down to the structure of the water. So what we know as water is H2O1, two hydrogen, one oxygen molecule. When water in nature flows through rocks, most of the riverbeds are igneous rocks. So rocks, your igneous rocks, your quartz especially, they hold memory. All motherboards, all circuit boards, they are made from quartz rocks. I don't know if you're aware of that. So quartz holds memory. And as water flows over these beds, they are absorbing ancient memory. And as water flows down waterfalls, they are gathering more oxygen. So the the molecular structure of water changes from H2O to H3O2, three hydrogen and two oxygen molecules. And that's what we used to drink. What we drink today is dead. So one can rectify that. What we do is we supply, we call it a water structurizer. It's a magnetic little component. So as you put the water in the top, it goes through a magnetic vortex and then comes out structurized. But you can do this at home just by putting it through a liquidizer, for example. So you electronically um, changing the molecular structure. And that has a huge impact on our health, Deepak, to put more oxygen into our blood for a start. So, yeah, the water that we are drinking in the rivers are toxic. They are full of E. coli. Something that we would never in our wildest dreams have thought of is pumping sewage into our water system. And that's been going on for over 20 years now. So our water system is scary. In my little town, our water gets switched off quite often. For us to go 55, 60 days without a drop of water out the tap is not so strange for us. So most of us live on rainwater. So we capture our water and put it into JoJo tanks. So my JoJo tank has got a big bag of huge rose quartz in it. So your quartz, besides storing memory, also stores minerals. So all the minerals are stored in the rocks. And this is where your microorganisms are important because they break down the minerals in the rocks and put it back into the water, into the soil, into the plants. It's so interconnected, it's almost mind-boggling. But if you just had to take one thing out of, let's say flies. Flies are the most annoying things on the earth. I don't know anybody who loves flies. But if you took all flies off the planet, there'd be such a huge repercussion, a negative one, because everything is in balance. I don't know if you noticed during lockdown, we were all confined to our homes. Lockdown did a beautiful job for the powers that be, because what activates us to do things we would normally do is fear and anger. And I think as a population, most of us went through those emotions, and those emotions leave an imprint, you know in our environment around us. So just like a fish doesn't know he's in water, we don't know what's around us. We think it's just air, but there's millions of molecules, microorganisms, possibly energy from other dimensions right around us, but we can't see it. And especially if your pineal gland is switched off from using toothpaste with fluoride, drinking fluoride water, not getting enough oxygen. So this is where your meditation and breathing is so important. You know, breathing is the movement of consciousness. So that's another thing. When you're in fear, you shallow breathe. So we've been sort of almost programmed, indoctrinated to not be our authentic selves anymore. And it starts with our water.
So it's the water, it's the air, and it's the food. I think most people are aware of the food. I mean, when you go to the shops, if you go to a supermarket, there's probably not a single thing that hasn't been processed and filled with preservatives and filled with all these chemicals. So I think people are slowly waking up to the food thing and trying to eat more wholesome foods and natural foods. But then those have also been compromised because those are, first of all, GMO. Secondly, they're full of pesticides and they're grown in malnutritioned soil, which is filled with artificial fertilizers. So to really live
Organically.
a proper life, how do we go about that? I mean, it sounds like almost impossible. It sounds like it's a losing battle. Or is there something that people can do? So maybe I would like to talk about practical things that maybe people can do to improve their lives, given that we are being poisoned from every single angle, everywhere we look.
Thank you. That's a beautiful question. A lot of people tell me I can't grow my own food. And I say nonsense. Food can grow in containers. So if you have a room in your house that gets direct sunlight, even if it's for an hour or two, you can take a container and put a few stones at the bottom. Stones are important. They help with drainage, but they also hold your minerals. Put some dead leaves, organic material, a few thin branches, and a bit of soil on top. And there's your micro home already, ready for you. And as you're working in the kitchen, for example, tomatoes, you know, the pips will come out, or the seed will come out. Scrape that off your counter and put it in your container. So you can grow tomatoes indoors. Onions. I don't know why we buy so many onions, because if you take the root part of the onion, so what I do is I just throw it in water overnight, and the next day I go and put it in a pot plant. So onions, within a few weeks, you'll have cocktail onions, pickled onions. Onions only take 2 years before they're ready to harvest from seed. But if you grow them from the rootstock, you can harvest them within a few months. And you can grow them in your house. Onions are so important for coughs, flu, asthma, emphysema. And I'm sure you've come across material, but during the days of the Black Plague, I don't know if you've heard any stories. My grandmother used to tell us scary stories how the wagons used to drive through Johannesburg and the people would literally throw the corpses out the window onto the back of a wagon. And it wiped out more than a third of our population, the Black Plague. And that wasn't just here in South Africa, it was worldwide. But they found that people who kept onions in their house, you know, in those days they would harvest the onions and then plait all the onion green leaves together and hang it in your house. Normally, people used to live in a single big roomed house, you know, an open plan home. And onions absorb toxins. So when your onions have a black bit of buildup around the various layers of skin, that means that it's absorbed the toxins out of the air. So people who stored their onions in their living space did not actually get the plague. So I found that fascinating. And then also with my own allergies, I got very ill, and it turned out that I'm allergic to a raw onion, especially if it's been cut and left for a few hours. So once you cut an onion, it immediately starts absorbing all the toxins in the air. And people think, and I used to do the same, put it in a sealed container and in the fridge, but it continues absorbing toxins, even the toxins in the plastic Tupperware. So when you cut an onion, use the whole onion. Don't use half an onion. Use the whole thing up. And cabbage is similar as well. When you cut a cabbage, you know, when you harvest it, it's still got the bottom part of it still connected. But as soon as you start cutting the actual body of it, just rather use the whole thing up. So, for example, with me now, with my food sensitivities, I've become allergic to cabbage. But if I harvest the cabbage that I grow in my garden, and I've just proved it again now this last winter, I was eating cabbage nearly every day. But it's from my garden, which is grown organically with microorganisms. And my cabbages were huge. I've never seen such a big cabbage. It was out of my own garden in the Kalahari Desert, where everybody told me you'll never grow anything here. So sorry, you're all wrong. We're growing a food forest there. And I never got ill, I never got a headache. But I think the trick was growing it organically and cooking it straight after harvesting. So that's another problem with our system. It gets harvested and it could be a few days before it gets to your kitchen. And then most of us store it before we cook it anyway. So it could be a week or two before it actually gets cooked. And in that time, it's busy losing its energy, its light energy.
That is so fascinating. So the onions I've actually come across, somebody taught me that you just take the root part of the onion and you can just put it straight in the soil and it will grow an onion. And I've seen this with my own eyes. I've got onions growing in my own garden that I have taken the root part of an onion and put it there. And why don't people do this? This is something that everyone can do. So Nikki has taught you how to make a nice little container of soil. Even if you don't have a piece of earth or you don't have a ground, but you have some sunlight coming into your flat or your townhouse or whatever, you can make a container of healthy microbiome soil and you can start growing onions and you can grow so many other things.
Tomatoes grow well indoors. Strawberries grow well. Strawberries love to grow in containers. So the ones you're going to struggle with are things like pumpkin, butternut, watermelon, because they use a very large space. But Deepak, I even grow potatoes in containers. So potatoes don't want too much moisture. And a sweet potato is another beautiful one. Sweet potatoes grows. I grow them in vertical, like trellises, and that's created huge sweet potatoes for me. One of our sweet potatoes was 5 kilograms. Take 2 milk bottles, was bigger than that. 2 liter milk bottles. So there's a lot we can do growing food in containers.
So, Nikki, I wanted to ask you, there's been a lot of information about hydroponics, growing fruits and vegetables in water. I've come across two different types of hydroponic systems. One is the one where they have a pump that circulates the water and they have plants sort of sitting in a pipe and the water sort of flows past the plant roots and they put nutrients in the water. And there's another system that I've seen where they actually just use a bucket. So there's no pump system and they put nutrients into the water of the bucket and they put the plants like literally straight into the bucket and they grow. I mean, what's your thoughts on that? I always feel that plants need to grow in soil, but maybe.
Yeah, that's a beautiful question again. Thank you. So, aquaponics is one way of growing where they actually use water that comes from a fish tank. So, the fish actually put nutrients in the water. And hydroponics, where it's used mainly with chemicals. So, I would say I've done more experiments with aquaponics. I'm not fond of chemicals. I realize it has a deep detrimental effect on my own body. So we're busy now running experiments using microorganisms instead of chemicals. So we haven't completed that experiment. And one also has to remember some plants do not like wet feet, whereas other plants do like wet feet. So you need to choose a plant that enjoys having wet feet for a hydroponics, aquaponics system. My sister built a very cute, simple one. She just took a thick, big PVC pipe and stuck it in a bucket with a little pipe at the top with little holes down the side. And then she cut holes on the side with plants in little cups. And she grew lettuce, parsley, cabbage. It all grew beautifully. But you have to be on top of making sure the water system flows every day. Um, yeah, I'm not fond of hydro or aquaponics, but there are applications. For example, if you've got a fish pond, and that's ideal for aquaponics. You put a polystyrene container on the top with your plants growing in the polystyrene container. So you're feeding plants chemicals, the plants absorb it and you eat it, and for me, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, something just didn't sit right with me with the hydroponics and, aquaponics system. I mean, the plant's supposed to grow in the ground with the soil, but I mean, I have seen um, good fruits or good flower or good vegetables coming from these systems. But I'm glad you're also confirming my sort of hesitancy and skepticism about it. There was an experiment I wanted to actually conduct. I don't know if you've heard of a radionics machine. Radionics machine is able to charge frequency into certain things, and you can even use remote frequency, so I can charge something far away. Um, and I have heard of people using a soil sample from the area that they want to plant in and taking the soil sample and putting that on the radionics machine and then running frequencies to boost the soil with microbiomes, the right pH, soil balance, and a whole bunch of good frequencies. And they've claimed that the crop where they've planted has been very good just because they've put good frequency into the soil sample. It's quite amazing. I don't know if many viewers are going to follow what we're saying, but that's an experiment I'm curious to run as well. Also on the hydroponic side, using the water sample maybe to charge it with frequencies and see what happens with the crop. Have you done anything like this before?
We've been fiddling more with copper piping, to put electromagnetic energy back in the soil. And I can see a huge difference with the plants directly around the copper tubing. Even I've tried in my garden here on the south coast in Natal, just stripping, my husband's an electrician, so just stripping all the wire and wrapping the copper uh, cable. It's a thin piece of copper, just wrapping it around even a susati stick or I've got bamboo in the garden. And I think that it's made a huge difference because the plants next to that copper are bigger and stronger than the other plants. So we've done tests using microorganisms with copper and without. And the more technology, the more different, what would you call it, techniques one uses, you can see the difference in the plants. And another thing that also has a huge impact is music and sound. So we know that sound has a resonance and it affects us, as electromagnetic molecules, it affects that. Sound even leaves specific patterns, which you can see in water. There's a scientist who's been, we mentioned water has a memory. She's been doing these tests where you put a bit of water in a petri dish and you expose it to a thought, a photograph, some mental environment, and then she freezes it for 4 minutes and 20 seconds. And when she takes this petri dish out, there is a visual imprint of whatever she exposed that water to in the ice. So there's so much going on that we don't understand. But everything is connected. So the more we're finding out, it's mind-boggling.
It truly is. I mean, Dr. Masaru Emoto did the whole studies with water, where he looked at the shapes of water, taking pictures of water crystals, obviously through a very powerful microscope, and he saw these different shapes that emerged in the water depending on what he exposed the water to. So he even used writing. He would just write on the water sample, or play music to the water sample, or speak to the water sample. Even had a priest pray over different water samples, and you would actually see the shape of the water change because he would capture that when he took the picture of the water crystals. So I'm a bit familiar with a little bit of the water stuff, and that's truly amazing. So back to your copper that you use in the soil. So you put copper tube, you tie it around like a sosoti stick or like a little bamboo stick, and you put it in the soil. But how do you send current, or do you connect the other two ends of the copper to some sort of frequency generator or some sort of electromagnetic?
That's a beautiful question. There is already energy in the soil and there's energy in the air. So the copper will naturally absorb all of that. But I think what you're leading to the next question might be actually how to generate energy from the soil. And I haven't tried this one myself, but this is my next project to generate an earth battery. So to put a hole in the ground and possibly to line it with quartz rocks, but then to fill it with charcoal, coarse salt, charcoal, coarse salt. So you've got a copper rod in the middle of all of this with these layers. And then to activate this, you add water. So water is going to be your conducting element here. And I've seen, and I haven't tried this myself, but people can actually run globes, garden lights, and stuff like this from that. So there's a lot we don't know. I've also seen people run globes, you know, these rechargeable globes, off the cambium layer on a tree. So it looked like that tree was possibly a yellow fever tree, which is a water loving tree. So trees that like water will have a high movement of fluid in their, it's xylem, phloem, cambium, and your bark. And there's fluid in all of these layers, but trees and plants that love water, there's a high movement of this. So I would imagine a high energy level. So people who live in rural areas should give this a go. Try and put a rechargeable globe into the cambium layer of a tree. It might actually glow. So there's a lot that we haven't discovered. And the powers that be don't want us to know alternative power. Otherwise we would have been riding hydro-powered vehicles long time ago. But fuel and oil keeps a whole industry alive.
Yeah, I know how evil the fossil fuel industry is. Uh, I actually came across a number of different videos about amazing inventions that have been squashed by the fossil fuel industry. One was actually a car that ran on water. This was in the mid 90s. A gentleman figured out how to use water, and he could separate the hydrogen and the oxygen, and basically ran his car on hydrogen fuel. But the water was the source of that. And there was a video of this that came out on some news channel, and then some investors in apostrophes, they came to see him and they poisoned him. Like 2 weeks later, he was dead, and that whole idea got squashed. And there's been so many other ideas of actually harnessing the free energy that the earth has, and the fossil fuel industry goes and squashes them, kills people, destroys the inventions, and makes sure that we never hear about it and we keep on using what they do. It was very sad for me that in 2010, I quit my corporate career. I used to work for insurance firms or insurance company. I quit my career to start a renewable energy business. I started a solar business thinking that I'm going to help the world be better and cleaner. And then only, about 10 years later, I discovered that the solar is also a total scam because it's so energy intensive to make these solar panels, all the components that you need in a solar plant, that the solar plant, when it's operational, never repays the energy used to make it and put it together, and all these hundreds of components. So that's how I ended up leaving the solar industry. And it's the same, all these renewable things that they tell us, these wind technology and all these other things, they're actually misdirection because they're not really free energy. And there is free energy, which is the amazing thing. There actually is free energy available to us. I don't know if you've heard about a guy called Maxwell. I think his surname is Chinawenda. I'm going to put up a video of his, but he's for a Zimbabwean gentleman, and he discovered how you can harness radio frequency just from the air and produce alternating current. And he's built a half a megawatt plant in Harare. So that's 500 kilowatt, and it pulls radio frequency just from the air and converts it into alternating current. First, it goes into DC current, I guess, and then it goes into alternating current so we can use it in our plug points. But he's also been poisoned. He's also been targeted, by the government and the fossil fuel industry and all these things. So it is there, and I hope some of these technologies do make it to the light so we can start using them and get the shackles of this fossil fuel industry off us.
We're living in such a dynamic time. We've seen so many amazing things happen in our lifetimes. And it's not just the fossil fuel industry that is deeply corrupt, it's the medical industry too. Um, People who've come forward with natural alternatives, like I think specifically of the periwinkle, the vinca, which is a known leukemia healer. What they did a few decades ago was they bought all the periwinkle farms in the UK and mowed them down to the ground so that they can force their statin medication. So it's not just fossil fuels, it's not even just the medical industry. We have been so bamboozled by the powers that be. So we are living in very interesting times. But our thoughts are far more powerful than we realize. There's nothing more powerful than prayer. And if we all got into the same bandwagon and just produced more positive energy, we would produce more energy on the earth. It sounds crazy.
So, Nikki, I wanted to give people some more practical tips. So, with all these poisons that we're getting poisoned with, we're getting poisoned, like you said, with our food and water and our medicine and our air. Is there practical ways that people can detox and get rid of these chemicals? I know there's heavy metal detoxes. Um, I've got a product that I buy from, I think it's called Simply Truth, or the Real Thing. Sorry, it's called the Real Thing Heavy Metal Detox. That helps to pull out all the heavy metals, because we get it from the water and everywhere. There's full of heavy metals. But are there other practical things you can give our viewers on how to detox?
Yeah, so again, mind, body, and soul, you need to detox all three modalities. So I like to use activated charcoal. So activated charcoal is great. If you've got poison in your system, raw egg works amazingly, and that's something important to remember. If your pets eat poison, just put a raw egg down their neck. You know, your diet is so important. So the right thing to do is to fast. So you can't just suddenly, having never been a faster, just suddenly stop eating for a while. Fasting is something that you train your body to do. So I've been a faster since a teenager. Initially, I started fasting on just fruit and water, and then eventually, as I grew into an adult, I was able to fast solely on just water. And then fasting became a weekly thing for me until I started having children. But I still fast. It's become a natural thing, actually. I fast without even realizing. And it's important to fast because you give your body a break. And that gives a chance to get rid of all those heavy particles that are in the body. So to detox the body, to detox the mind is so important. What are you thinking? What are you telling yourself? What is your story you tell yourself? I think that's probably the most important. So when you start telling yourself that you are divine and you are amazing and you have a divine purpose that nobody else has, you start feeling important. And that lets off an energy in your body that heals. They say love heals all things, and it really is true. And that even applies to our gardens, our plants, our animals. They are able to feel that energy. If you are an avid gardener and you go away for a month, when you come back to your garden, your plants know that it's you. They recognize your DNA imprint.
So it's very interesting that you mentioned fasting, and this is something everyone can actually do. And I want to tell you how I came across fasting being so powerful. So, in my little health practice, I've got a quantum resonance magnetic analyzer. So, this is something that can scan the patient very quickly, very accurately. It measures the body's electromagnetic field. And what I saw in the person's stomach, because it gives a little detailed report on what's happening in the stomach, I saw that the three healthiest stomachs, because I scanned maybe about 200 people at that time, and I saw there were three people who had the healthiest stomachs. It was so perfect. And I asked each of them, "What do you guys do? What's your secret?" And guess what? All three of them were intermittent fasters. They were very serious about intermittent fasting, and they did it consistently for many years. And I realized then, okay, there's something to this. So I've been also intermittent fasting for, I don't know, a couple of years now. I feel great. It did take a little bit of time to get used to. Activated charcoal, that's another thing everyone can do. You can go get it from, uh, you know, a good health shop. So that'll also help your gut, help with the detoxing. And then moving into fasting and then also eating more fruits, because I understand eating fruits have a detox process in them. Like fruits are naturally detoxing and they help to get toxins out. So these are something the viewers, everyone at home, something you can do right away. Start to fast a bit more, start to eat more fruits, and activated charcoal. So, Nikki, we are sort of coming to the end of our show, but I wanted to spend some time talking about your amazing online shop. So, I am going to leave the details below the video. It's called rootedingrace.co.za. And on the store is a whole bunch of things. It's not just organic fertilizer, but there's also furniture and decor and stuff for your children, clothing, handbags. There's a whole range of products. I think, Nikki, you said there's over 200 different products there. So maybe tell us about this so our viewers can get an idea of your wonderful online store.
And thank you so much for the opportunity. So the the shop is an online store. All of the products that are on the store are actually made or supplied by locals on the South Coast, KZN South Coast. You know, we're the lowest income per capita in the country. We have no industry. Tourism is our only lifeline, and that has collapsed. So we need to find an alternative way of surviving down here. So I'm hoping the online shop will help the community as a whole. Um, the fertilizers are not on the shop yet. I will be adding the gardening section hopefully within the next month. And I'm doing a talk next month on microorganisms. I'm hoping to have stock available for that talk. And then once I've got that, I'll put it on the shop. What we do supply is brew packs. So we teach people to brew their own microorganisms. The biggest cost in microorganisms is the cost of transporting the water. So we're trying to avoid that because there's a lot of water, obviously, in brewing the microorganisms. So, yeah, our stock on the shop is from local people who do creative things at home. And this is just a platform for them to supply their stock to the public. And then we've got artists, original artists, my own children and myself, we all do art. So it's just it'll take a bit of time for us to get it all in the gallery, but you know, we'll get there. And the next thing I've got somebody doing embroidered denim jeans. They are stunning. So hopefully that will be the next product on the shop. And then I have a lady who makes the most exquisite soaps. They too beautiful to use. They are so beautiful. She puts roses and beautiful flowers on them. And she also uses natural products, a lot of aromatherapy oil, etc. So we've got a lot of exciting products coming down the line in the next month. I've only been running the shop now for 7 weeks, so I'm still new in it. It's taken me a while to wrap my head around the back end program of the shop, but we're getting there. And I'm very proud and very happy um, to showcase our locals and what they are capable of doing here.
That is so amazing. So everyone watching, please go support Nikki. Go check out the site. The link is in the description below. You're supporting um, local producers, I guess, from the KZN region. The products are handmade, and there's a whole range of products on this online store. So many different things, like Nikki even mentioned, there's a lot of artwork there. I have actually seen very cool stuff for children, because I see there's stuff for children, toys and children's like mini activities or puzzles or that kind of stuff. That's been quite interesting. The clothes also handmade by the locals, so you can support a local producer and get really amazing quality products. They're very affordable, so this is not highly, marked up stuff. It's very affordable for everyone, and it's online, so you can get it anywhere in the country. So, Nikki, as we're closing off, we spoke about detoxing. I wanted to understand if there's simple things that people can do for their water to clean their water. I know there's all these water filters out there, and there's this three-stage water filter that's very popular. I've put one onto my main line of the house, so it's like three different containers. I think one with soil, one with charcoal, and one with like more fine sand or soil. Um, but yeah, maybe water. How can people clean their water effectively?
Thank you, Deepak. So yes, I also have one of those water filters on my system, and they work a charm. If you're in a rural area and you don't have access to that kind of stuff, you can filter your water through sand. So ran an experiment for a few years where I was running. I had a vegetable garden which was fed only off washing machine water, skip, Omo, sunlight, soapy water, and that went through an area of not even a meter, so it was a horizontal system, a meter of different types of soil, so your rocky right down to your fine soil. And by the time it came out the other end, it just filtered into the rest of the garden, and I grew everything in there, even an avocado tree, pawpaw trees, all the vegetables, tomatoes, peppers, they all grew in dead leaves and washing machine soap water. So that is one way. Another way, I collected a lot of 2 liter bottles and then cut them open and then daisy chained them into each other and then put different types of soils in. And by the time it came out the bottom, it was clean. So yeah, boil your water. You can put jig water. You can put jig in your water. Then you just leave it for 24 hours. This even kills E. coli. So Jik is another alternative. One can buy water, like you get these chlorine floaters for the swimming pool. You can buy one of those for your water tank, which is also effective. When we go into the bush, Big Five, I'm a wilderness trail guide, so I take people into the Big Five. And there we dig a hole in the riverbed and we create a little well. It takes a while, and eventually the water seeps to the top, and we collect that, put it into pots, and then we actually use tablets. So you get clarifying tablets. So there's lots of ways of making your water safe. In my own home, it goes through the filter like yours, and I boil it in the kettle, and then it goes into a jug with a few crystals like rose quartz, tiger's eye, amethyst, etc. And I might put a bit of cinnamon or clove or something just to flavor the water. And if anybody is sick, that water will go through a liquidizer if I don't have a water structurizer at hand. The water structurizers are quite expensive. It's about 2,500 rand for a little portable one that fits in your handbag, and about 7,000 rand for one that fits onto your main water line system. So all the water that comes into the house will be structurized. So the molecular structure has been changed from H2O to H3O2. I think that's probably the biggest secret that's been let out the cat's bag today.
Nikki, this has been so amazing. I initially thought we were just going to talk about the store, but you've actually given us a wealth of information. And I love that it's all practical. You, the viewers at home, you can do this. There's practical ways to detox your body, clean your water, grow food, and so many other things we've discussed. So please get hold of Nikki. Her details are below. Please go support her website. And if you have questions, you want to reach out to me, please do. My details are also below here. Nikki, I look forward to the next chat because it feels you are an absolute wealth of information. And I love the fact that you have done the experiments yourself. You know, you haven't gone and just trusted some science report or some science study somewhere. You've done the research and experiments yourself, so you know actually what works and doesn't work and what works better. And firsthand experience is very, very rare these days because we just have learned to just believe the experts, right? Trust the experts. Oh, they come from this fancy university and they have all these titles. So believe them because they're the experts. But no, no, no. They're experts at poisoning you. That's what they're experts at. So take the power back into your hands. And Nikki is proof that she has grown stuff in the Kalahari Desert where people said it's not possible. She's grown stuff with washing machine water, which is full of all the chemicals. And there are ways to do it. So she's a wealth of information. We really appreciate your time, Nikki, and we look forward to chatting again with you in the future.
It's been an honor and a blessing to be part of your podcast, Deepa. And yeah, we've been communicating for years, and it's the first time you and I have actually spoken face to face and being able to see what we look like. So it's been a blessing. Thank you so much. You must have a blessed day.
Thank you, Nikki, and till next time, ciao for now.